So, hey, welcome everybody. And I'm going to encourage you to use our chat, for any thoughts, questions. I want this to be casual, informative. Welcome, Christine, to
Thanks
this
for having me.
session for Gold Standard. And I'm going to be typing in the link to her bio also in case you guys want to look at it. But I'm going to begin, in an interview that Christine did. She talked about widening her skills, and her advice was, quote, take on things you might think are over your head and approach each challenge bravely and clear-headedly. So I just sort of put a pin on that because certainly, in my, I don't know, 50-year career, that is probably advice that I just would have kept reminding my younger self of too. So let's start. Christine, Streb is just incredibly physical. How did you start with Streb?
Well, I grew up doing gymnastics, so actually Streb was actually like coming home after I had done some dancing actually in San Francisco. So I started my dance career in San Francisco. I danced with Axis Dance, which is a company um, of dancers with and without physical disabilities, an integrated company, and also with some of the aerial dance companies that are out there, very hanging off of buildings and cranes and whatnot, which is it's actually a pretty vibrant aerial dance scene in San Francisco. So I started my dance career out there and then moved back east. I happened to audition for Streb when I was home for the holidays, and I was like, oh, let me just like try this out. And I went to the first day and I was so sore I couldn't like move, but I didn't go back to the second day. But she actually called me and she's like, hey, why don't you come back? Why don't you come join the company? I was like, I can't. I've got contracts out in San Francisco right now. But it kind of planted the seed for me to just start working towards coming back. So again, it was kind of like I had done gymnastics as a kid. I sort of made the decision to stop gymnastics when I went to college and we didn't have a team. And that's when I actually got back into dance again. Did my MFA right after college, and then got some jobs out in San Francisco. So kind of followed the meandering path back to sort of my more athletic dance roots through that whole situation. So yeah, it was physically my body was sort of made for Streb because of the gymnastics training initially.
So obviously, we're all AAPI. I mean,
Yeah.
was that sort of part of your identity through gymnastics into dance or not?
Yeah, it certainly. And I think I built some resiliency early on in terms of being able to pivot because of that first move from making that decision to not pursue gymnastics into college, and then sort of finding my way back into dance that way. Um, because there wasn't a team, there wasn't really an option to continue. So because that was so much a part of my identity going into college, making the shift from gymnastics back into dance prepared me for making the shift to move from dance into something else. So yeah, I mean, and because this is an AAPI space, I just want to say I did grow up, in a pretty I was third generation Chinese American. I'm Gen X, so like at the time there weren't as many of us because the immigration laws changed in 1965. So to be a third generation Chinese American on the East Coast, there just were fewer of us. So there were a lot of second generation. I didn't find a lot of community. Because within the AAPI world, because there just were fewer of us where I grew up. So yeah, I did align my identity along athletics and then with dance.
Oh, that's so interesting. So, having seen Streb, it's amazingly physical. And obviously, respect and trust are part of the underpinnings in order to perform that work. So, at what point did you realize a transition out of performing was coming for you?
I think as soon as I started, um, I knew that it was there was some kind of endpoint. I sort of said to myself at the beginning, I just want to do this until, as long as I'm still having fun, I want to keep doing this. As long as I'm still being fulfilled artistically, creatively, I'll keep doing it. But, when sort of the pain outweighs the pleasure, I want to make sure that I am ready to move on. So I think I had like had this seed planted. I feel like a lot of us have that seed planted early on. You know your career is not going to last for forever. I guess when you're a choreographer, that extends the life. But if you are leaning into the performance aspect, and I guess it was a different time too. Like gymnastics, you're seeing all the athletes extend their lifetime of being able to compete at that top level, now into their 20s and 30s. But at the time, I feel like, okay, let me just know that sort of 35, 40 is sort of something out there that I want to just be aware of. Um, and so that was always in the back of my head that I kind of had a seed planted.
Well, we each, come to our dance career with different agendas and different needs and what it is that we get out of being on stage. So, how did you didn't go through denial or you didn't go through like a big emotional kind of thing when you made that decision that I think this may be my last season?
Oh, certainly. Yeah, it was, but I think I set myself up to have still a trickle of the nuggets that still fed that in me. So, even when I went to business school when I retired, just because I needed something very structured. I knew that I knew this about myself that I needed a structured community because to stop being part of that touring community that where you're so tight with everybody that you're with, that I needed something to hang on to. And I kind of knew that I needed to be sort of a clean break, so that I could set up that community for myself. And then I also kind of said, you know what, I still need to keep dancing a little bit. So I figured out like what I could build around, while I was doing business school, how could I still keep dancing? I ended up paying for business school because I got a job teaching as a lecturer at UC Davis, where I did my MBA. But that sort of simultaneously helped pay for business school and kept my foot in the door of dancing and feeding that need within myself. So
So,
I'm lucky. I just have to say that I'm very like fortunate to have been able to design that for myself. But yeah.
So I'm interested in knowing your process to understanding what other skills you had to even
Hmm.
apply for business school. I mean, that's like a huge right brain, left brain jump. So how did you really access the kind of um, passions and skills and potential expertise to make that jump?
Yeah, it's kind of like what karate was sharing at the beginning, when you introduce yourself and you have to introduce yourself as I'm a dancer, choreographer, educator, XYZ. A lot of times you have to do a lot of different things in order to make your life as a dancer work, especially early in the career or before you get a company position. So I was paying attention to what felt good during those times. Like, yeah, I liked teaching, but I also felt like, oh, that was draining versus energizing. And I noticed that, okay, I actually, like the balance of the physical to the cerebral moment. Like, um, I took on, some grant writing positions when I was dancing. So then I kind of understood like, oh, okay, I like this part of fundraising, but I don't like events part of fundraising. So let's like lean into this part versus this part. So it was just sort of the necessity of having to do so many different things, to make your life work and design the life that you need to live. And then just paying very close attention to what's energizing versus draining.
So you literally planted a foot in, you kept a foot in the dance world as you're trying to step into other possibilities. Is that a fair description?
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I do want to say that not everything was super conscious at the time. Like looking back, I'm able to say, oh yeah, obviously it makes sense when I, ha had this pathway because I started doing grant writing and I started doing database management. So obviously, it was just a little bit haphazard, but then um, it kind of was like, you kind of start with a slab of marble and you start chipping away and it becomes clearer. So, the process of hacking away at something, kind of, as you mature, you know more about yourself. You figure out, um, what feeds you and what doesn't.
Well, so certainly for me, my network was in the dance community, but then in the midst of transition, all of a sudden leaving dance and going into the, legal field, for example. How did you start when you're doing some grant writing and these other kind of admin stuff? How did you get the jobs? How did people say, oh, you should talk to Christine? How did that happen?
Yeah, slowly. And I think it was like, there's some patience involved. And I definitely think that going to business school helped, even though like I don't necessarily feel like I am using the specific skill set that I earned there, but it was more about confidence building and then having a little bit of something to hang my hat on. Like, okay, yeah, actually I do I do have financial skills, even though I wouldn't necessarily have thought that. Just taking some classes and something gives yourself a little confidence, but also just some of the language that you can start using to start talking about your work, or being able to make analogies between, oh, okay, yeah, I balance my personal budget, so I can balance a larger budget. Just it has more zeros behind it. Um, yeah, and I don't know. I sorry, I lost the thread of the original question, but yeah,
I'm glad that you raised finances because, making transition, you lose one source and you're sort of banding about trying to find other sources and you still have the expenses going out the door.
yeah,
So, how did you manage to keep yourself afloat?
a lot of those little jobs along the way. But I think, yeah. Being a dancer just really prepared me for that, because you had to kind of take on all these kind of the hyphenated positions that we've been talking about, and not being too precious about what I was willing to do at some point, just to get the information to do a lot of different things. I was like I said, I was lucky too. I think that um,
Did you
you know
downsize your monthly? Did you like move to a
yeah,
small apartment and do all of that kind of stuff?
yeah. I think I mean I think that the most downsized I was during my dance career. So I don't think I got more downsized than that, but I just was used to that at the time. And so yeah, I'm trying to think back to that particular moment. Um yeah, just finding temp work, or finding ways to do small projects for a bunch of different people. I think that that's what happened in that moment. I stayed on campus for a little while after I graduated from business school, because I happened to graduate business school in the middle of the recession, 2009. So it did take me a few months to kind of get my first job out of that. But continued working for the university, continued doing little things here and there. But the fact that I was able to get a job at the university was really very helpful.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And you have strong communication skills, both in listening and speaking. Have you always had that, or was that something that you had to?
Well, thank you. I don't think so, but um uh yeah. I think that I always felt a little bit more confident in my writing skills as a communicator, and that's how, I started doing more grant writing initially. And then started to get just put in front of donors as a dancer, as sort of, this is where you kind of leveraged your, um, you know, people want to put this little model citizen or a dancer in front of funders, so just using those opportunities to kind of like start to understand what this game is. What is that fundraising game? What am I supposed to say to this donor when you like stick me in a room with them? But just starting to be more natural to have conversations, those kinds of experiences, just like I didn't realize it at the time, but then when you become like a leader of an organization and an executive director, then you're able to more clearly tell, a donor, what you think that they might want to hear to give you money, or help dancers, like before you stick them in a room with a donor, say, oh, don't worry, just share your life experience. These are their priorities, to be able to kind of just have a real conversation and um, match some priorities with whoever you're talking to.
And to stand up for yourself too, right?
Yeah, yeah, certainly.
That
Uh,
well, that's been communication has been something that was not a strong point for me. So I'm very aware when I hear people say, I
yeah.
can write easily. So
Yeah, and especially with like the unionization, just being such a big part of our industry, I think, any opportunities to be a shop steward or to take a leadership role in a union, if you have the opportunity to be in one, those kinds of experiences and exposures can really help build those skill sets.
right. So did you have a particular role model or support system through, say, one of the earlier transitions that you made?
Yeah, I think that I always had some people that I could bounce my ideas off of, and I think that this is probably like my biggest takeaway of like, oh, if I had known this a little earlier, to more intentionally, have like your personal board of directors, I call it now, a set of people that you're not necessarily working with. Who might not even be your closest friends, but some people that you really trust their opinion, and that, can know you and know your strengths and know your skills, so that you can kind of start bouncing ideas off of, them. Because, I was definitely like trying out. You kind of like play dress up with different opportunities or different possibilities of what you might try to pursue next, or as you're going through any transition. And I've gone through many transitions, I think, career wise, that I'd always sort of like tap a couple of best friends, or my personal board of directors, and say, I'm thinking about this. What do you think? Does that fit with what you think of me? And sometimes it'd be like, oh, that totally makes sense, or like, I don't know. And it would sharpen my thinking about what my next steps were. It would say, if like reflected back at me, they're like, I don't think that's a good idea. I might kind of dig in and say, no, it is a good idea. I really believe it. And then, have to sharpen my argument about it, and then go back to them and say something else. And then they're like, oh, okay, that makes sense now. Or be like, yeah, you're right. I was totally thinking that on a whim. Now I'm thinking this, and then, hear what they're reflecting back on me. So just like find two or three people that kind of know you, know your strengths, and kind of have an idea of what's going on in the world, so that you can like test your theories about yourself and what might be a good fit.
I love that personal board of directors. We take for granted the community of dancers that we sweat with and work with every day. And when you lose that, what do we have? Some of us may not have immediate family. And so creating that kind of support system, um, it's probably not a conscious choice, but it should be as part of self-care.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, so speaking of some misconceptions or things that you weren't aware of, now that you are actually a senior consultant, what are some misconceptions about the act of transitioning or making a transition in career?
Um, I think my experience is that, when you make a decision, it doesn't have to be a forever decision. I now sort of make my living advising organizations, not mostly nonprofit organizations, on strategic planning. And the time horizon on a strategic plan is typically a 3 to 5 year plan. You kind of put a big vision out there, the future, but you're like, okay, what does my life look like in 3 to 5 years? Or what should the organization look like in 3 to 5 years? And how can I design the trajectory I want to, execute within 3 to 5 years? And I think I've always sort of been chunky like that in terms of like phases of my life. And for me, it's ranged from like 4 to 7 years, maybe, but like not to be too precious, to sort of like put the ball out there and go to that ball, 3 to 5 years out, and not make it seem like I'm making this decision for the rest of my life and I'm going to have to live with it. But that it's all a generative learning experience. So yeah, it's almost like I do a little strategic planning for myself every 3 to 5 years. It's like, okay, who am I now? What are my strengths? What makes me different from others? Okay, how can I really leverage those strengths? What's the marketplace look like? Where can I best make an impact? Okay, so given those things, what's the best option for me to pursue in the next 3 to 5 years? So,
Repeat
I'll make that parallel.
repeat those bullet points because those are really important. I mean, it was certainly the case for me. Repeat those sort of touchstones, or if you will, in the strategic planning.
Yeah, and I'll put it in the chat too. So know yourself, know your environment, uh, know your strengths, and then like what are the best opportunities?
Great.
3 to 5 years.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, Strategic planning seems like a scary thing, but it really becomes a roadmap, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah, and I think sort of the way our firm does strategic planning, it's like sometimes like I said, like for your personal strategic plan, you don't have to be too precious about like thinking that it's a forever plan. Um, when we do strategic planning, we try to say like just going through the process itself is part of it, and that sort of builds your muscle for thinking strategically on a daily basis. So if you're like kind of like processing all these things, those bullets that are now in the chat, sort of constantly, that's part of the sort of like being self-aware of like what's again what's feeding you versus what's draining you, and and just like building that into like your daily practice of like um you know, thinking through what you're doing. What does a personal strategic plan encompass? Yeah, and I was just trying to make a parallel. So I think it's just like there's so many different models out there for I don't know, when I was coming out of business school, I what was popular at the time was like what color is your parachute? But there's all these like leadership quizzes, like I don't know, like I get like I take a Myers-Briggs test every like couple of years just because I'm curious if I've changed. Myers-Briggs
Oh,
are like the personality tests, and I don't know. I'm just kind of one of those quiz people that I love kind of framing different parts of how I think in a lot of different ways, and that just I don't take anything too seriously. You take your horoscope, you take your Chinese zodiac, you take all this and just kind of like agree or disagree, but like have a moment to say, oh, okay, yes, that is something about myself. Okay, let me think about this. So when you ask Sarah, what does a personal strategic plan encompass? It's more about like going through the process of being a little self-reflexive and about scanning the environment for, you know what, like this opportunity is no longer like a lucrative position if that's what if you're looking for, or this opportunity, I don't see, I see so many people entering this field, and I just don't know if I can really make a difference because the people I see entering it, uh have medical degrees or something that would take me a lot of years to accomplish. So like kind of being realistic about like what you can achieve. And if like that medical degree is something that like makes sense for your ultimate goal, then that is something that you're like, okay, well, okay, how do I take the next steps to start to do that if that's your goal? So it's like the process, I would say, rather than the plan.
And process is really an important word. Uh, and I love the fact that you said that things can still remain in flux, right? As you consider what is going to happen, because you never know what opportunities and just serendipitous events might occur. Um,
Yeah.
and also, I found that when I entered my sort of mid 30s, my values shifted in
Hmm.
such a way that I don't know if it's true of anyone else, but I even started to question the people that I were sort of my personal um, friends network, who really was giving me time and kind of feedback, like you talked about your personal board of directors, and
Yeah.
who was really sucking the air out of my life 90% of the time.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so true, Bonnie. I think that like taking stock of what you're doing and your personal values and your priorities, that's you're kind of optimizing your life for around your priorities. So if there's something that you're doing that you're spending a lot of time on, that's another kind of part of strategic planning. It's like, okay, is there anything I should do more of, do less of, start or stop? And you can kind of do that with your life too. It's like, okay, what what is generative in my in what I'm doing now that can lead to my ultimate goals, or what's taking time away from something that might be higher priority, and just kind of make some decisions on what to start and stop doing, including maybe being friends with people that might be a drain versus or like doing less of it, or figuring out how to align your actions with your priorities.
So, in the strategic planning that you do with La Piana, do you find that most of the organizations need to come with a stronger mission statement upon which to build a strategic plan?
Um, Not necessarily. I'm trying to think through lots of different organizations. Often we go through the process and then it's obvious if the mission statement is true or if it needs to change. Um, and that can be kind of your personal, like if we're kind of making this parallel and trying to do this analogy, you know, maybe you're just realigning your personal sort of mission and goals based on that better understanding of who you are and how you fit and what impact or what what you want to put out in the world, what catalyst you want to be in the world. Um, yeah, and not to get too attached to like that means I'm doing this specific thing. A lot of organizations have the same mission and they're doing very different things to approach it. So you can have the same personal mission as each other and come about it in very different ways. So I think that that's very, very true as well.
So, with individuals in various states of transition, what do you think is the hardest obstacle to overcome?
Change. Yeah. Anytime you're changing, I mean, there's kind of like, people who embrace change and people who like resist change and people who are like, oh, okay, I'm open to it, but I kind of don't know how to go about it. So like know that about yourself. I actually like change and I think that like it sort of started by saying like I started developing that resiliency early on because like I had to change from being a gymnast and then I had like a pretty big injury. So then like, I think that um how you approach things like that, like injuries or time off or um like that can just paying attention to what you do, how you feel in those moments can tell you a lot about like, okay, I'm one of these people that's resistant to change. I should know that about myself so that I can do X, Y, or Z. Or I I embrace change, so maybe I should calm down and not try to change as much, or um yeah, so I think that definitely, as humans, we're resistant to change a lot of times because we like to be good at doing the things that we know how to do. It's comforting. You build a community around it, you build a life around something. And then, sometimes it's like pulling a thread when you change one thing. So no one really wants to pull that thread of their life. But it's about like pulling that thread and stitching something else together at the same time so that you can kind of um, not lose the things that you really care about as you make a change and change things slower if you need to change things slower, but to recognize that, okay, this is going to require change. So how do I approach it, and then designing it around whatever your comfort level with change is.
So in this hypothetical, um, I'm in the middle of, a career transition and a work opportunity comes forward. How do I know whether to do it, to accept it, or pass?
Hmm. I think you can kind of start to build like your decision criteria that you might want to make explicit and say, any change that I make cannot affect my financials, or any change that I make cannot impact my relationship. Um, you kind of like draw certain lines or and prioritize like how much you're willing to change one thing or another, so that you can evaluate an opportunity based on how it's screening through that set of questions. Okay, is this opportunity, you know, advancing my goals? Is it, leading to future opportunities? Is it, compatible with my current lifestyle, if that's important? Um, and then and then based on the answers to those questions, you can kind of uh, it becomes like a little clearer what your decision can be. But like I think thinking through like what your decision criteria is a good exercise, like what's important to you and how you'll make that decision. Even before you have that opportunity in front of you, it's like, how will I make a future decision? It's a good exercise to do even before you have an opportunity.
Yeah, so much good information. Okay, hey, you guys, any questions? I've been sort of laying a little bit of the, I don't know, meat that we could chew on. Uh, anyone? Sarah's been the only one to ask. You got her here with us. Don't be shy.
I'll say
No.
one more thing,
Yeah.
that whatever opportunities you take, kind of make yourself like a learning agenda or like an objectives that
Uh,
you might want to get out of any particular opportunity, even if it's like really small. Like, okay, what is my learning agenda for this? Or like, what are some key objectives that, even if this is a short-lived opportunity, I want to be able to say, yes, I learned this, or yes, I achieved this. Okay.
I have a question, Christine.
Yes.
Are
Go.
there any skills that you would advise current performers to start to work on now so that they're in a better place when they're ready to transition? So like for example, like writing for me was a really
Yeah.
good bridge. Like I felt like as long as I knew how to write well, I would always have a job and I could
Hmm.
always like pull out some grant writing or like pull out a dance magazine article or like some, like I could always get a
Yeah.
couple $100 here or there if I could write. So are there any other skills like that that are um that performers can start to work on now for later? I mean, I know like Gina has her real estate license. Like
Yeah.
and like of course like she just performed at the Kennedy Center, but like she got that while she was
Yeah.
dancing. So what are some
Yeah.
other things that we can do?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, certainly communication skills are things that never, that can be used in a variety of ways. But I'll go back to like identifying your strengths. Like for you, Phil, you're a good communicator, you're a great writer. So okay, how can you then uh, enhance that superpower of yours? So you could take more jobs, writing freelance on the side so that you build that resume for it, so that you take your core strength and you enhance it. Regina, she's extremely you know, personable, can sell anything. You know, kind of like
What you want to
leaning,
be.
yeah, leaning into that sort of you know, sort of natural strength, or you know, that superpower of hers, and identifying, oh yeah, like real estate, and maybe, you know, I'm speaking for you, Gina, but like, you know, maybe that like it feeds her to look at properties, and that's an energizing thing. So again, it's kind of like going through that sort of process of identifying your strengths and knowing what's feeding you. Yeah, Gina, so that we're not talking about you.
I mean, I love it. This is great. I'm on the phone Zoom, so I have no idea how to put the hand down. So that's just going to be there. Sorry, OCD friends. Um, I am currently in, an extremely large transition, and I had known this was coming for a while. And the thing that I'm feeling right now is that I'm coming to the end of my runway financially.
Hmm.
And I have had over 8 months of submitting a resume. And now my resume is interesting because I grew up and belonged to a company during a generational time where it was not even allowed to go to college. So
Yeah,
I don't have a college degree.
yeah,
And I'm finding that in this current landscape with AI and with the first original, like I can't even get my resume to be seen. It is just automatically siphoned out because there is not that base level of education. So like my question is, and now like also my thinking, I was like talking to another actress on this show. She's a bit older than I am, but she started at a bank and she's lucky enough to have this like stable job while she pursues her art form. And she's like an immaculate singer. And she was like, I think we should start a whole community of artists who have these skills, but don't traditionally fit. It's like people who are, may identify on the spectrum. They're not going to be good in a
yeah,
traditional uh interview. So like my advice that I would love to have is like, how do I break through yet another feeling?
yeah,
And so like I'm keep sending out word of mouth, like I made a point this week to sit Jeffrey Finn down, who's the producer for Broadway Center Stage, and was like, I have this. And he had no idea. He was like, whoa, what?
yeah,
And then like, and I'm trying to like work the producing ankle while also standing truth in the fact that I still am very much an active dancer and performer
yeah,
and want to be seen as that. So that has been an interesting dynamic just this past week to be like, oh yeah, I'm this and I look this way still and I do this and I can hit the note, but also I have this acumen and you might not have a job now, but
hmm,
like I want the associate producer job, but like how can I keep my I'm finding I feel a little defeated in the resume search because it just is so many I've put out and so
yeah,
many rejections.
yeah,
And I just don't know the tools in which to have I have the Harvard Business School colleagues, but that's also just like brainstorming.
yeah.
Is my only choice to become my own CEO of a company because I didn't go to college is my question.
No, but thank you for naming that sort of like the financial reality of like, okay, when your one way runs out, and do you, you know, take a just a, you know, a job that can kind of keep paying the bills while you're still trying. It's sort of like a balance, but I think I'm sorry it's happening, and I know that like this is part of the environmental shift of like, oh, okay, the resume is not going to be the thing for me because AI is siphoning my stuff out. I think what you're doing is really smart of just doing more word of mouth, and it takes such a it's a heavy lift, and it takes a lot, but I know that when I was coming out of I sort of mentioned this earlier, sort of coming out of business school and during the middle of the recession, I did not have anything on my resume that spoke to anything other than dance. I did a ton of informational interviews with a lot of people just to, um, you know, under the auspices of, you know, I want to pick your brain about, you know, a career in this or a career in that. Not not disclosing that I was looking for a job, but just to kind of pick their brain, just to kind of get more language, like hear how they were talking about things so that I could use it in my next interview, so I could use it in my next like cover letter. So that I could even see like, oh, actually, I'm not really interested in marketing. I thought that that was something that I might want to do, but no, the day to day is not speaking to me. So having more conversations maybe with different functions, like you talked about that associate producer role as sort of your ultimate goal. The more, can you talk to more associate producers and see like what their pathways were, see if there's sort of an adjacent role that might be more feasible to land initially to get your foot in the door. But I'm not necessarily equipped to like give you very specific advice, just sort of some
Yeah.
food for thought. But having a lot of conversations helped me clarify, how I present myself to others.
Yeah, I have I just it just is reaffirming to know that like I'm trying to do the right thing
Yeah,
and like avoiding panic and also like trusting in myself that like there is in fact a reason why something hasn't cropped up,
yeah,
and keeping to, like I am committed to this switch to film and TV.
yeah,
I'm making headway in that. I
yeah,
am, but like I seek a stability that for most of us on this call, I was fortunate enough to have in a dance career. And so like but I seek now even more stability.
yeah,
And so I am a science nerd. Like if I could have it all my way, I would just like sit in the park and read a Scientific American. And there's this opportunity to take like a class that could also put me in some more circles to do like medical editing, which to some people is like, that sounds so boring. To me, and in a family of doctors, like that's
yeah,
not boring.
yeah,
Um, not boring at all. Um, but yeah, and I'm trying very much so to I could put my name out there. Phil is such a wonderful like historian. He is a teacher. I am more of like if I were as I'm like clarifying what my speaking points are, like I'm more of like a TED Talk. I'm more of a keynote
mhm,
speaker. I'm not going to give a lecture in a dance space unless it's like, a very short, lecture after a master class. These are kind of things that I'm trying to like kind of shop about. But also, like I also am gonna name it that like there's been a real slowdown
mhm,
in those kind of jobs. So and sometimes even like a couple steps back, it feels like we're not on that vibe right now
yeah,
as a country. So it right now, like what I'm craving more than anything is community. I did take you know entertainment community fund has these resources, and so I've taken that step. And you said do the initial onboarding and then meet with a coach. I'm trying to do all these things in the time that I can, whilst also putting together a full show in 2.5 weeks.
yeah,
um
If I could just
and
jump in one moment. Thank you,
mm,
Gina, for mentioning it. I serve on the Entertainment Community Fund Western Council. So I really want to make sure that everyone here knows that there are emergency funds, there's insurance, there's housing. There are so many resources. When I was asking Christine about her transition and her resources and mentorship and support system, there are organizational supports too that are important. The reality is they're important. So thank you for mentioning that, Gina.
yeah, of course. I mean, it's like this is still like I'm at the very preliminary journey of that. Um and I had reached out earlier. This is not my like when I really needed like mental health, and then I just want people to know that that was there for
yeah,
me. And they were really great in that way. um so yeah, I just wish there was more. I love that we have this like this community right here. I wish it would, I can't wait for it to grow. And so we have this like network. It's also just like kind of alarming that, you know, LinkedIn also has a lot of like bait and switch job postings. So I
Yeah.
think for me, I'm just going to stick to the in person and word of mouth. And you know, like things do crop up. They do
Yeah.
crop up.
Yeah. And then I think it's also like, we talked, I'm looking at Phil's comments here too. And, you mentioned that medical editing opportunity, and it's kind of about finding the right balance and designing the life you need and want. But if that needs to happen for a second so that you can achieve financial stability, so that you can get more of a runway to then pursue something like that's an option. I mean, it might not be something you're ready to do yet, but just thinking through how things can ebb and flow and how one opportunity can lead to another. And then to pick up on Phil's thing, in terms of like how do you get hired for something if it appears that you're not like committed to them, and people are looking for like more commitment now, and the job market's a little softer, so like how do you do that? And I think that the more you talk to people, like start to try to really craft that personal narrative
Mm.
of, you don't have to say that you're only doing this part-time, like, but talk about the objectives and talk about, the learnings that you have from these different experiences. And just like you don't need to necessarily paint things in a very linear fashion, like on a resume, it's very like linear, but like even fashioning your resume around like capabilities and core skills, and that can be another strategy for presenting yourself either in an interview or on paper. So to try to frame it through a narrative that you're producing versus you know making sure that you're ticking the boxes of like, okay, I'm putting my education and I'm putting my experience. If it's not linear, and a lot of us don't have linear stories, make your story and then stick to it. Arlene, I
I'm
I
see.
just want
Yeah.
to I just want to chime in and say that it's possible to focus too much on the fact that you don't have something, or that there's something bad on your resume, or there's something missing on your resume, and to lose kind of hope or faith because of that. I mean, I had a very checkered college career, like to the point where I thought, like I could never reveal my GPA, I could never go to grad school, I could never do any of these things, and it's possible to like sort of stop yourself from really moving forward by that kind of self-talk. And so I just want to encourage you not to do that. And I think that I think Christine's point about learning vocabulary is really, really key. Because I do hire people, and sometimes their education or their jobs don't exactly match, but the way they talk about the work that they want to do is convincing. In their cover letter, always write a cover letter, no matter what they say. They make a case for themselves, and I just want to encourage you not to get discouraged. Also, I have to say, Christine, you are like so much mature than I was at your age. So you have a very like defined approach to like, and it's really wonderful. I was not that way, and so I just want to say that it's possible not to be strategic and still end up okay.
Yeah. And I don't think I was strategic, like I said, like I'm looking back and sort of like matching it up or knowing how I would go moving forward. But yeah, I was much more chaotic in my early part of my career and nonlinear. And I think that's, and I also want to say that time stretches out so much when you're looking for a job that it feels like forever, and it feels like you're always failing. And then like looking back at those time periods, I'm like, oh, that was actually not that long, but like 6 to 9 months feels like forever when you're trying to like make a budget to make sure that you're surviving during that time. But yeah, I think just try to be as organized as possible and know what your exact runway is, and but know that it doesn't last forever. But it feels like forever.
Also, if you want to get by the AI reviewers of resumes, you're doing exactly the right thing by networking, because a lot of times hiring managers will say to their HR people, I want to talk to this person because they were referred by so and so. And
Yeah.
the HR people will actually pull the resume and make sure that you get a chance to talk.
Yeah. Yeah. And then use that opportunity. Like, so get that opportunity for yourself by wedging
And,
your foot in the door
and
and use this
sometimes
network. Yeah.
And sometimes it's helpful on the resume also at the very top is to just do a brief 1 or 2 sentence about, some of those things and that make you distinct and, sort of quote soft skills. Uh, I was talking to the head of nursing at one of our area hospitals and she said, you know what, when I get a resume for an RN, if I see that they have dance as one of their hobby or past, whatever, I always bring them in because they're typically the nurses that are disciplined, they persevere, and everything that we want. So don't discount what we gain as dancers and
Yeah.
can contribute in other ways. So I wanted to just make sure we save time. So Phil can talk about Gold Standard and our push for membership.
Yeah, folks. So thank you so much, Christine. Thank you, Bonnie, for hosting such a lovely session. I know we've got lots of nuggets for social media, and a lot of people will be watching this later. So one of the things that we're really trying to do at Gold Standard is to get more people to join like yourselves. So please tell your friends. It's $25 a year. It's sort of like NPR, and you get to be a part of this community. We have talks like this every single month, and we provide services to the Asian American community. We're launching a film festival. We just did a big series of performances at the Kennedy Center highlighting Asian choreography. So the way you guys can help is just to join as a member, tell your friends, tell other Asian creatives who work in dance, because the more members we can show to foundations, the more opportunities, the more resources we can pull in to support the Asian community. So we're really hoping that we can do this together and that we can build a stronger community, and so that when we need situations like, hey, we're transitioning in our careers and we need a little extra help, we can be here as an organization for the broader community to make this a little bit easier. So thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next month.
Yeah, and I'll just say that I dropped my email in the chat. If I'm happy to kind of chat with any of you. You all seem like amazing people, and happy to kind of suss through any personal questions that you might have that you might not have felt comfortable voicing in a larger group.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. Bye.